Now that we know a little bit about how routing works, let's define a new route. But we have to be careful where we define this route because the order in which the routes appear in this route collection is significant. Basically, the routing engine evaluates each entry that we place into the route collection, and the first one that matches the URL will win. The default route entry that we have here is very greedy. It matches nearly any URL that we throw at it. We know it matches /home/index, it matches /home, and we even saw it work when we hit the root of the application. And it can do this because it provides essentially default parameter values for anything that's missing in the URL. If we want to define our own route, we probably want to place it in front of that default route, and we want to make the URL pattern that it has to match a little more restrictive. So let's call this the cuisine route. And what we expect to see is a URL that starts with cuisine and then has some sort of name parameter in the URL. And you might say, but how does that work? It's not pulling out a controller name or an action name. And I just say you asked the question a little too early. What we can still do here in the default parameter values is say, use a controller name of cuisine, and the default action should be search. And those are the only two default values that we'll put into play. And now if we have a request come in for /cuisine/French, that should go to the cuisine controller and pass along the name value as French. If we have a request come in for /home/index, that is not going to match this cuisine route. Instead, the routing engine will evaluate the next route, which is the default route. It will match there. And as a side note, let me briefly mention this ignore route method call. The routing engine will not try to process a request that's going to reach a real file on the file system. That's why we can have a request for something like /content/site.css, and the routing engine won't interfere. The server can simply send back the CSS file in response. We don't need this request routed to a controller, we just want to serve the CSS file or an image file. And this all works because the routing engine doesn't intercept requests for content that is on disk. But there are some quote-unquote files served up by ASP.NET that end with an AXD extension. Although these files do not exist on the file system, they are actually just a special case that ASP.NET already knows how to handle without the routing engine getting involved. Ignore route is just telling the routing engine, ignore any requests with an AXD file extension. ASP.NET already knows what to do.